Okay, thank you. All right, we'll go ahead and get started. My name is Keith McCall. I'm the Assistant Director of the Office of Graduate Fellowships and Awards. I wasn't planning to do this presentation. Bonnie, who I think most of you know, was going to do it. So bear with me because I'm the only person here. So I might have to go over and check things on Zoom. As people join, you guys see like a notification. Those of you who are in the classroom, you see a notification that somebody's in the waiting room and I don't notice it. Please let me know. So we're going to talk today about the application process, our internal application process for applying to Fulbright. We have a fairly robust and involved application process at FSU. It is in your interest to apply through the university. You don't have to. If you don't select the university, you will apply at large. But then they'll think it's weird that you are at a university that has FPAs like us and that you didn't apply through the university. So you want to make sure when you're setting up your application that you do select FSU as your current host institution and apply through the university. To do that, though, you'll also have to go through our full application process. And so that's what we're going to discuss today. At any point as you have questions, please, those of you on Zoom, drop them in the chat or just take yourself off of mute and ask your question, or some other way of signaling that you have a question. Obviously, those of you in the classroom, just ask your question as you have it. Okay. We're not advancing slides easily. So do the old-fashioned. Okay, so first thing we'll talk about is eligibility. It's pretty straightforward, but also it can affect sort of your timeline of where you are in school, can help you think through maybe when's the best time for you to do a Fulbright. The big thing with, well, we'll get to that. We're going to also talk about the application checklist and what the application process looks like. We can talk about the selection process a little bit, although that is months down the line and there's more important things to discuss at this point. And finally, we'll talk about how the Office of National Fellowships and the Office of Graduate Fellowships and Awards can support you throughout the application process. As I said, we'll make time certainly at the end for questions, but as you have questions, just ask them when you have them. Okay, so eligibility, like I said, it's pretty straightforward. You have to have, by the time your grant starts, you have to either have your bachelor's degree. So you can't still be enrolled as an undergraduate student while you are on your Fulbright, but you cannot yet have a doctoral degree. So there's a pretty broad swath of people in between those things who it's appropriate to go on a Fulbright at any time. You do not have to be enrolled. Like if you are an undergraduate student now and you will have graduated with your bachelor's by the time your grant starts, you don't also have to be enrolled in graduate school. You can just be, doing whatever you're doing and have your Fulbright. If you're a graduate student, basically, anytime up through earning your terminal degree, you can be on your Fulbright. Whether that means you are going to graduate first with a master's and then do a Fulbright, or have your Fulbright as part of your doctoral program or whatever program you're involved in. So those are the sort of two big eligibility bookends as far as degrees go. You must have graduated with your bachelor's by the time your grant would start, not by the time you apply. So when you turn in an application in October, you can still be an undergraduate student. And you cannot yet have earned your doctoral degree by the time your grant would start. But again, you can apply, if you're going to graduate in December, but you turn in an application in October, that's fine. There's some gray area for how they think about whether you have your doctoral yet or not. You do have to be a citizen of the United States or a national of the United States. So it's open just to U.S. citizens because it's funded by the U.S. Department of State. There are foreign Fulbright that if you're not a U.S. citizen, you can use to attend graduate school in the United States, but you have to be in your home country to apply for those. So most people interested in those are not at this info session today. Depending on where you're going, you will have to have sufficient proficiency in the written and spoken language of that host country. And this differs a lot. So if you haven't yet started to look at the different countries that you can go to through Fulbright, once you get on the website and start looking, you'll see that there's a lot of variation in what each country is looking for. Some countries will require no proficiency in the language, or they'll recommend a language proficiency at novice or intermediate level, depending on the country. Others will have a hard requirement that you have a certain level of proficiency, ranging from novice to typically intermediate. You might occasionally see expectations of having advanced skills in the country. If you have no language skills at all outside of English, there are plenty of places you can still go to do a Fulbright. So that might be part of, if you're here today thinking through, I don't really know where I want to go, that might be part of how you decide. You might look at the language requirements for that country or for countries and decide, okay, I do not have intermediate German, so I'm not going to go to Germany. But there's a lot of places you can go that you don't need those skills for. So that's going to vary a lot based on country, but every country profile, when you look at the website, if we have time today, I'll go to the website at the end and just pull up a couple countries to show you what that looks like, where you can find the key information. They're going to make that really clear for you to know whether you need proficiency for that country or not. Applicants also must be in good health. So if you are offered the grant, you will have to take a medical exam before you can go. It's not anything stringent. It's not like, this isn't like a medical exam for joining the Army or something. It's like, basically, are they going to feel comfortable sending you overseas without there being some sort of medical problem that you have to deal with suddenly that you could have known about and didn't do anything about, and now you're overseas away from your support system, and this becomes a problem for IIE and the Department of State, who are in charge of you while you're overseas. So really, they just want to know that, as I do with a lot of things, they really just want to know that you're not going to be a problem for them once you're on your Fulbright grant. Are there any questions about eligibility? Okay, so the application is, it's not a terribly lengthy application, but it's sort of deceptive in its simplicity. So there is an online application form that we would definitely recommend you be starting early. It has a lot of little fields that you have to fill in. It basically wants you to put your resume or CV into application form on the internet. So it's a little tedious. It's not the hard part of doing the application, but it's not the sort of thing you want to start 2 days before it's due to us. You want to give yourself time to go through that. The application does not have any sort of internal spell check. It will not data validate for you. So you also want to make sure that you're putting everything in correctly. Give yourself time to go back and make sure that everything is entered properly. Inside of that application, there will be, it's not on here. They're not listed separately. There are 3 short essays that will be part of the actual application. So your personal statement and your statement of grant purpose are the 2 biggest essays you'll have to write. Those you will upload yourself to the application, but there will also be 3 short answers that you sort of fill in on the application. For those, we very much recommend you write those in a word processing document and then paste them in. Do not write them in the application. So the statement of grant purpose is the sort of bread and butter of your application. That is where you say everything you're going to be doing on your Fulbright grant. If you are applying for an open study or creative arts award, your statement of grant purpose is 2 double-spaced pages, minus a couple lines for the header on page 1 and 1 line for the header on page 2. If you're applying for an English teaching assistantship, then your statement of grant purpose is a single double-spaced page, again with a few lines taken up at the top for the header. It's not a whole lot of space to work with. And whether it's the 2-page version or the 1-page version, you're going to be trying to get a lot across in a very little space, not a very long amount of paper to work with. And so that and the personal statement, which is always going to be a 1-page document, single space, whether you're doing an ETA or an open study, those are the 2 things that we'll be spending the most time on as we work together to get your applications ready. You need 3 letters of recommendation. For an open study or creative award, these are pretty standard letters of recommendation. You'll ask faculty member or other people who are familiar with your work and you as an applicant to write you letters of recommendation, and they will upload those as part of your Fulbright application. Just like letters of recommendation would be for applying to grad school or for other fellowships you might apply for. If you are doing an English teaching assistantship, then you do not get full letters written. Instead, through the application, your recommenders will have a sort of form sent to them that will have fields that your recommender will have to populate for. So it's a little less arduous because they don't have to write a full letter from nothing, but it also is more tailored to what they're looking for in a good ETA. So it'll ask them specific questions about things related to what Fulbright will want to know about whether you'll be a good ETA or not. Letters of affiliation are required for most open studies. If you're doing an open study that's actually a graduate degree enrollment, typically your enrollment then will count as the letter of affiliation and won't be required to have one as part of the application. And I don't believe that ETAs are required to have a letter of affiliation either. If you're interested in an open study award, though, you have to have an affiliate in the host country. somebody who says they will basically sponsor you as a researcher for a year. Typically, your affiliation is going to be somebody based in an academic institution, sometimes in other cultural institutions like a museum or a library, and occasionally even it can be a point of contact in something like an NGO, depending on what sort of work you're doing and what country you're going to. The affiliation options will look a little different. But what you want is somebody who will say that they do support the work you're doing, and ideally are also offering to give you like a desk and a space to work in. And if you're at a library or a university, maybe they can also say they'll set you up to have access to the university library or the databases or whatever. So you want to make that connection. If you need an affiliation as part of your application, start that process as early as possible. If you're going to somewhere in Europe, a common pitfall that students run into is forgetting that many people in Europe are going to be on long vacations in the summer because they don't have the same sort of work until you die attitude that we do here in the United States. So they have vacations. So if you try to contact somebody in July, they just might not respond for 6 months, or well, that'd be ridiculous. 6 weeks. So start that process early, because also we had a student whose affiliation almost fell through at the end of last year, right before the applications were due. She was able to scramble and get another affiliation, but you can only do that if you've already made contact with a few people, right? So to have a strong letter of affiliation, you'll have more and more back and forth with your possible affiliate. You'll have them be fairly familiar with what your project is, so that their letter of affiliation actually kind of can act like a fourth letter of recommendation, not just something saying, yeah, I guess we'll take this person. Yeah.
Does the current student who's on Fulbright now have an affiliate or not necessarily?
No, so an affiliate will have to be somebody who's, I don't think they are specified that they have to be like native to the country, but it'll need to be somebody with a position in the host country. So university faculty are probably make up, I would say, the majority of the affiliations used. But it can again be like somebody who's in a research position or in a position that's related to the work you'll be doing. I don't think ETAs need an affiliation. You can also think you can get another, you can have multiple letters of affiliation. You don't want too many. You want to be, you want to show that you will be based at a single institution. But for instance, if you're a researcher who needs to be based at a university, but you also would need to be working at an archive, having a second letter of affiliation from that archive that basically says this person will have access to the sources that they say they need access to, it can just attest that attests toward the feasibility of your project. So think about letters of affiliation playing that role as well. Also, if you're thinking of sort of what your supplemental project could be, your cultural engagement side of things, if you're gonna, let's say you're going to volunteer with an organization that does refugee resettlement. Getting in touch with them early enough that you could potentially have a letter of recommendation or a letter of affiliation from that volunteer organization that you work with would again speak to the feasibility of your cultural engagement side of your application. Yeah, Catherine. So I'm pretty sure that is correct. That as an ETA, you do not need an affiliation because you are basically being placed through the host countries. So they'll place you in wherever they need you, and that's your affiliation. So you're not expected to have an independently gotten in touch with like a primary school where you would be teaching English and have them write you a letter of affiliation, because all the ETA placements are handled through the host country. Okay, you also need your official transcripts for every institution attended. So this is a little bit misleading because as part of the initial application, you do not need official transcripts. You are welcome, Catherine. But what you do need is, so you can go on to your student records here at FSU and get the informal, the unofficial transcript. You just want to make sure that it says FSU and your name clearly on any version of a transcript you upload. So for the application you'll turn in October, it is okay to have an unofficial transcript. If you are selected, you will need to be able to provide the official transcript. So keep that in mind. If you think there's going to be a problem with getting an official transcript, you might want to go ahead and start that process so that if you are selected, it doesn't become a scramble to make sure you can accept your award. But for any unofficial transcript that you're going to upload for any institution you've attended, you do want to make sure that it has your name and the institution name very clearly on it. So if you have an output from, some school's website that doesn't include that, you'll need to find a way to get a version of the transcript from that school that will include the institution name and your name very quickly. If you are selected, you will also need your passport. Again, you do not need that by time of application submission, but to go to the country that you're saying you want to go to, you will certainly need that passport. I think you can get passports on campus. I think there's a thing in the
It's in the stadium.
in the stadium. Yeah, thank you. For people doing creative arts projects, you will be required to turn in a portfolio as part of that. That'll be part of the selection materials that they'll use to decide whether you are granted the award or not. If you're not doing creative arts, you do not have to worry about that. It's only for people, they'll want to see your work. They'll want to see that you are, you have some proficiency in the type of art you say you're going to go do on your Fulbright. And so that'll be fairly well detailed in the, if your country allows creative arts projects, they might include some information about what they're looking for in that portfolio. And that will again be detailed on that country profile when you look at it. Questions about the application, the components of the application, or any of the things we just went over? Okay, so now we'll talk about our internal process. So the national deadline for Fulbright is going to be in early October. Last year it was October 7th, I believe. It'll be around the same time again. Don't pay any attention to that. There's a whole lot of things you need to do before that October deadline. So right now, the October deadline is kind of meaningless. Our first internal deadline, those of you here in the room, let me move this so that you can read it. So our first internal deadline is June 9th. On that date, we asked you to do two things: to turn in your intent to participate, which basically you can do as early as you want. As soon as we send out that link, which we'll do probably by the end of this week or early next, you can go ahead and tell us that you intend to participate. That just gets you on our list as somebody who's applying this year. With the intent to participate, all you basically do is say your name, your email. If you've already worked with an advisor or know the advisor you will work with, you can put their name down. We just use that to make sure we have a kind of evenly split workload. And you tell us what country you plan to go to and the type of award you think you're going to apply to. You're not beholden to those things. You might be thinking of 3 or 4 different countries right now. You can't put 3 or 4 on the intent to participate. So just choose one, and we'll help you narrow that down. The big thing that's due on June 9th is the pre-application. So the pre-application will ask you to turn in rough drafts of your 2 essays. We do mean rough draft. We are not looking for anything polished, but we don't just want sort of a bullet point list of topics you might write about. We're looking for you to have done a little bit of the work already. Basically, have a foundation that we can start advising from and start the feedback process with. So we'll ask for rough drafts of both the personal statement and the statement of grant purpose on June 9th, as well as, again, at that point, we would expect you to have a fairly firm idea of where you're going and what it is you're doing. This isn't on here, but in between the June 9th deadline and the next one listed for stage 2 on July 19th, we have a deadline which we want you to give us the names of the people who will be your recommenders. We will reach out to them and give them sort of a form letter that we have that explains what a good recommendation for Fulbright will look like, and just gives them a little bit of information so that their letter can be as strong for you as it possibly can. That's also so it lets us reach out to them. It also lets us know that who are going to be your recommenders. That's an important part of this. Recommendations do play a big role, and it's not something, again, you want to leave to the last minute, because you also want to be giving your recommenders plenty of time to write you that strong letter. Then our on-campus deadline happens on 2 different days. On August 23rd is, if you're an ATA applicant, is when you will submit your application. You will actually do this through the Fulbright portal, but it won't yet go to Fulbright. If you're applying for an open study or a creative arts, you will do that on August 24th. You'll submit your full application through the Fulbright portal. At this point, we are looking for you to have as complete an application as possible. Polished essays, all 3 letters of recommendation, your letter of affiliation, all supplemental documents required, transcripts. I guess that's the only real supplemental document required. Short essays in the application as well, done at this point. If you're missing one or two things, inevitably that happens to a couple people, their affiliation hasn't quite come through yet, or two of the recommenders have responded, but one hasn't. That's okay, we can work with that. What we do at that point is go in and we export that whole application and we send it out to a campus committee for review. So between the on-campus deadline, between stages 2 and 3, we send all those applications out to faculty reviewers who either themselves have had Fulbrights while they were students or as faculty, or they have area expertise or in-country expertise in the place that you're applying for. They will interview you for about 30 minutes, sometimes 40. They'll ask you questions about your application. They'll give you some feedback. So we can also unsubmit your application after you've done your campus, after you've met the campus deadline. We can unsubmit your application. You can make changes to it before that national deadline. So it allows a chance for faculty to give you feedback on your application that you might use to make a couple, final changes before finalizing for submission. It also allows the faculty to write a campus evaluation of you, and this acts as another sort of letter of recommendation and an endorsement from FSU that you are a good applicant. We would never not endorse somebody if unless it was like something really egregious like academic dishonesty or just like for some reason your statement of grant purpose is just like all about how you want to go and be an imperialist in that country. Yeah, we might not recommend you. But even with an endorsement, there's varying levels of sort of how strong that campus evaluation endorsement can be, because it's actually a thing that requires the faculty to write a couple paragraphs about their sense of you as an applicant. They will address things like your maturity and your flexibility, your ability to represent the United States abroad. It's pretty sort of standard things that Fulbright is looking for, but a really strong campus evaluation can really bolster your application. And the stronger application, the stronger that getting the strongest one of those requires you to have that really complete and full application by the time of the campus deadline. So those interviews usually happen around the second week of September. It's a lot to the logistics of figuring that out is complicated, but we'll do those over Zoom, so you won't have to be here on campus if you're traveling or you're otherwise away from campus. That's fine. You'll just have to be able to sign up for a time slot that you can make it to and do your interview. Then we'll submit everything. We will go in and we will upload all those campus evaluation forms. We will attach them to your application. We'll go through a final checklist with you for your final application, make sure everything is good to go, and then we'll actually submit it to Fulbright. And we'll do that for, by the whatever they come out with for early February or for early October. At that point, so Fulbright has 2 rounds of review. The first round of review happens in country, and that is the National Screening Committee review. So that typically happens in November and December. Your application will go out to a bunch of panels of different faculty and other experts in the United States who will review your application. They will come out with their recommendations of whether you have been chosen as a semi-finalist or not. They say you're either recommended or non-recommended in their language. If you are recommended, then your application gets forwarded onto the host country for their side of the review. And we are not privy to how that side of the review happens. We get to actually observe the National Screening Committee review. Bonnie and I observed some this year. I think Jesse has done it in the past. So we can see how they do the review on the US side. We don't know, it's sort of a black box, how host countries make their decisions once the applications go to them. Some of them will interview you, some of them won't. And at that point, things can start rolling out anywhere from sort of early March until last year as late as July, still 1% of finalists had not found out whether they were finalists or not. So you can find out as late as July or as early as like the first or second week in March, whether you've been selected by the host country as a finalist. And then I guess that goes back to the Fulbright board for, to final approve the applicants that the host country has selected. Any questions about our internal process, the dates, or anything to do with how selections are made? So about that National Screening Committee, that's step 4, stage 4. It's important to know that you will not be talking to people who are in your specific field in your application. The National Screening Committee committees are pulled together from people in sort of various fields, people in area studies, people with different, levels of language training or not. You might be interested in studying Andalusian Spain in the 1800s, and you might be being read by somebody who works on 21st century trade agreements between the US and Spain. So they're not going to have any familiarity with the specific language or debates of your field. So when you're talking about the project you're going to do, you need to make sure that you are explaining that to a broad audience. And again, we don't know when it goes to the host country who makes up their committees, but you should assume a sort of same level of a non-specialist, general educated audience at that point as well.
I do have one question.
Yeah.
That's okay. You said that you would be sending out an email with the link for the pre-application form. Is that like, do we have to sign up to be on that email list? Or
Did you register for this today?
I did.
Okay, so we use everybody who has attended any of our workshops or even just registered for them is now on a list of stuff that we send all Fulbright stuff to at this point going forward. If for any reason you don't get it, just reach out to any one of us. We have our contact on this as well, and we'll make sure you get it.
Thank you.
Okay, I feel like I just went through this, so we'll skip. I won't say all this again for now. Yeah, good question. So somebody asked in the chat is, based on this timeline, would the Fulbright research typically begin in summer, fall 2024? So that's a good question. And it's one of those questions that, as a lot of things with Fulbright are, I'm going to say it depends, because it's going to depend on the country. So you will apply in October 2023 for a grant that would at earliest begin fall 2024. For most countries, that's how it's going to be. It's going to begin sometime around about the same time that we began our fall semester in the United States. I was just looking at Spain ETAs with somebody this morning who's interested in going to Spain for an ETA, and their grants specifically are starting, I think, on September 15th for 2024. And they're going to go through June 15th, 2025. Some countries, especially in the Southern Hemisphere, their timeline of their semesters doesn't line up quite with ours. So some of those grants will not start in the fall 2024. They will actually start in spring 2025. So depending on where you're going, you could start your grant as late as spring 2025 or as early as August, September 2024. If you're interested in like an open study research type award, you might have a little bit more flexibility in your grant tenure. You might be able to choose between whether it's 8 months or 12 months. You might be able to start in December or September. Some countries will require things like they want everybody who's coming there that year all there at the same time for a like pre-grant orientation that's going to happen on a specific day. So you have to get there by then. For the ETAs, those are usually a little bit more rigid in their timelines because they are usually linked to the semester system for whatever school it is you'd be teaching in as an ETA. Okay, I just tried to update this PowerPoint before this. That June 7th is wrong in this date, so I'll try to update it before it goes out. It is June 9th for the pre-application deadline. Okay, again, I feel like I went through all this. So I don't think I'm going to read each of these and talk about each of these slides. But if anybody has any questions about the application process, now is a good time to be asking. You are welcome. Good question. So somebody asks if your references, your recommendations have to be professors, if they can be employers. Again, I'll say it depends on what it is you're trying to do through your Fulbright, who would be a good recommender for that. Certainly professors can be good recommendations, but having 3 recommendations from professors at FSU who all know you in a very similar capacity is going to be a slightly less strong slate of recommenders than having people who could speak about different aspects of you in the application. So I always encourage people to be thinking about diversity in their letter writers, people who can sort of speak to the different parts of how you're portraying yourself in your application. So if you have somebody you've worked with as, let's say, for instance, you've you've taught and you've had like, you've been a TA for somebody and they've supervised you as sort of a mentor or a teacher. That might be a really good recommendation who could talk about you in that capacity as sort of you as a teacher, you as a mentor. But then you might also have a PI that you've done some research with, and they can talk about you as somebody, they can talk about your research acumen. So think about how recommenders might be able to speak to different aspects of you. Again, the student I met with earlier today who's interested in the Spain ETA, she does want to work with, for her supplemental project, it would be to work with refugee resettlement in Spain. She's done a lot of that work already in the United States, and she could get a letter from a supervisor who has worked with her in that capacity. So 2 of her recommendations could be from FSU faculty who can talk about her ability to teach and to have well-developed pedagogy for the sort of teaching English as a second language work that she wants to do. But she could have a 3rd letter that speaks to the cultural engagement and supplemental project side of her work. So it can be good to think through sort of what you would be asking, why you would be asking a particular person to be a recommender. And I think that matters more than who on paper that person is or what their title or position is. Okay, so how we can help. So ONF and OGFA, we share the Fulbright process. Typically, if you're a graduate student, you'll work with OGFA. If you're an undergraduate student, you'll work with ONF. That's not a hard and fast rule. And we also sometimes will, send our advisees to each other to have a second set of eyes read over things. But we can certainly help you with the application management. If you're stuck anywhere in the actual application form, we can help you go through that. Make sure that you are just getting all the moving parts together as you need to. We can help you think through who those recommenders would be. So you don't have to come up with that on your own. We can help you strategize who would be your best recommenders. We're happy to sort of talk with you about the possibilities and to think through how your application is shaping up and what it might be good to have a recommender be able to speak to in that application. It's also perfectly fine when you're thinking about your recommenders and you're selecting them. You can tell them why you have selected them and what it is you hope they address in their recommendation. So it's always good to give your recommender some direction, but we can help you come up with not just selecting who you're going to ask, but also how you should ask that person and how you should communicate with that recommender so that you get the best recommendation from them that you can. We will host various workshops. We'll do a couple of peer review workshops and a couple of writing workshops over the summer. And we also will work with you one-on-one on revising your application. So that's the bulk of what will happen. I don't exactly know what ONF's policy is. Our policy is that if you're working with us, we want to meet at least 4 times between the pre-application and the on-campus deadline. Most of the people I work with, we meet way more than 4 times. Typically, we meet about every 2 weeks, sometimes a little bit more often, depending on sort of that person's work schedule and how much encouragement they need to be getting where they need to get. I say meeting, sometimes that might look like you just send me drafts and I send you backtrack changes and comments, and then that counts as one of those 4 meetings. Other times we'll hop on Zoom and we'll actually talk them things through, or I'll send you track changes and then we'll get on Zoom and talk about the changes. We can also put you in touch with people at Fulbright. If you have specific questions, we can help you navigate sort of, sometimes people have questions that are very specific to the country they're going to. We can help you identify who the point of contact is for that and how you should reach out to them. Also, there's a lot of just general questions that we both have as fellowship advisors, and so we will reach out to Fulbright for those. But we'll also reach out on behalf of you so that you don't have to make that contact yourself. We know who we can get quick answers from, so we are here to do that for you as well. What questions do we have?
Are we supposed to, with regards to like advisors within your offices, are we assigned to people based on our pre-application, or?
A little bit of this, a little bit of that. So, typically at this point, like I've already, there's some students that we've all started already hearing from that have told us they're interested, and maybe we've met with that student already, and so that student's sort of on our slate now. Others, as they come in, again, if it's if you're a graduate student, you'll probably get assigned to me. But even though we're meeting right now, I'm perfectly happy to work with you. So But, Bonnie and Jesse and, others at ONF, Craig, and, they sort of just look at who's coming in and, again, if they have a standing relationship with that student, they'll probably work with that student. If it's somebody new to them, they don't know, it will just get sort of assigned to whoever has, we just try to keep it slightly balanced, so we all have roughly the same number of students we're working with and one person isn't swamped. But there's no real rhyme or reason to how the assignments are made.
Thank you.
Any other questions? They don't, any question you have about Fulbright is fair game now. It doesn't have to be limited to just the things we discussed today.
Actually, I do have a question so you mentioned earlier about like, if you have like a recommendation or something in Europe, like get it done earlier. Because like maybe on schedule something, so if I have a teacher who I work with a study abroad, should I contact them earlier, maybe before the summer, in case if their schedule is like?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say, if you think you already have a good affiliation in mind, there's no reason to not go, especially, if you're sure you're applying this year, I'd say go ahead and reach out to them.
Okay.
It can't hurt.
Yeah.
Even if you don't actually go ahead and ask them for that for that affiliation letter for another month or two, just alerting them that you'll be applying for Fulbright. You'd be interested in having them as your affiliate, see if they're available, see if they're willing. If you reach out to somebody and they're interested in your project, but they say they just don't have time to be your affiliate, a good thing to do is to always ask them, can you recommend somebody else?
Yeah, I wouldn't need for an affiliate, just for a rec letter.
Oh, okay. Yeah, for a rec letter, I would certainly say go ahead and, again, get it on people's radars.
Okay.
So, your strongest rec letter will come from somebody who also has seen your application materials. So you may not actually want to get that recommendation from them until a little later in the summer when you feel like you've got not all the way polished drafts, but at least you can give them something that indicates what it is you're planning to do on Fulbright. And that way their recommendation letter sounds like they know who you are and what it is you're doing.
Okay.
But it's never too early really to go ahead and just tell faculty that you are considering, that you'd like to know if they're willing to be a recommender for this.
Okay.
Catherine, should I wait to get my official transcript until I finish summer classes? You don't need your transcript until that August deadline. So if you'll have grades for summer classes before the 23rd or 24th of August, and again, you don't need the official transcript for the application that you turn in this year. You only need the official transcripts if you are selected as a finalist for that final, for finalizing your decision as a finalist. They will probably want to see your official transcripts at that point. But for the application that you'll turn in time for the national deadline in October, it's okay to have unofficial transcripts. So if you can wait and have your summer classes reflected on those, on that unofficial transcript you can get through my FSU, then yeah, I think that would probably be best. Other questions? Got 20 minutes, we're ahead of schedule, so. All right, we got a long one here. Now that is a tricky question. Can you have a JD and be back in school for a master's and apply for Fulbright? That's the sort of question that's probably best to reach out to a program officer at Fulbright and ask them. My sense is, so a JD will be considered the terminal degree for that discipline. So it's they do the same for like if you have an MFA. You can there's sort of like a gray period where you might still count as a student, but it might be more appropriate for you to apply for. There are some early career options as well. There's an early career Fulbright and there's a postdoc Fulbright. So I'm typically when they do their own information sessions, they specify PhD. I'm a little less familiar with how they might interpret it for somebody who has a professional terminal degree. So if you want to follow up with me later, I can help you get an answer to that. Can you apply to more than one award? No, Sophia, you can't. Not in the same year, at least. You have to specify, you can only turn in one application each year, and that application has to specify the country and the type of award you're applying to. So you can't sort of try to cover all your bases and apply for an ETA in Spain and study research in Germany and an ETA in Uruguay. You're only allowed to turn in one application each cycle. You can apply in following years. In fact, we've had multiple applicants who applied 1 year and either weren't selected at all or were selected for semifinalists, and then applied again the next year and got it. So Fulbright kind of likes sometimes to see that you have the persistence to want to apply again if you didn't get it. It won't hurt you to do that. But you can't apply to multiple awards in the same cycle. Any other questions? Would you all like me to go to the Fulbright website and show you what a country profile looks like? Sort of how to navigate some things on the website? Okay, we'll do that. So the website you will be going to is us.fulbright.org. Yeah, .org. So make sure you go to us.fulbright.org, because if you go to other versions of Fulbright, again, there are a lot of different things that fall under the Fulbright purview. There's Fulbright Scholar Awards for faculty. There's foreign Fulbright Awards that bring foreign faculty and foreign students to the United States. So for the US student program, you want to make sure that you are on us.fulbrightonline.org, us.fulbrightonline.org. And you'll know it because it always has this picture of this man with this robot and this woman inside this ice cave. Okay, so once you're on this site, obviously underneath countries is where you find countries. So let's just pull up a random. Let's see what they're offering for Romania. Okay, so when you open up the initial page, it'll then be broken into the different award types being offered in that country for this year. These are all current for this year. I believe they updated all this on March 31st, but we are live now for the 2024 cycle. Oh, yeah, sorry, y'all. Okay, there you go. Okay, so we're now on the Romania page. So Romania has 12 teaching assistant awards. If you open that, you'll see exactly what they're looking for as a teaching assistant. So the first thing you'll want to pay attention to is what degree level that award is open to. Not all ETAs, very few of them actually are open to doctoral levels, doctoral students. I had to go through that with an applicant last year who has just been selected as a finalist to Uruguay, but she's a doctoral student in communication science and disorders, and she first wanted to go to Columbia. That's where she really wanted to go. But Columbia only allows ETA at bachelor and master's levels. So she could not go there given her degree program that she's in. So you just first want to make sure that it is open to the type of student that you are applying as. It'll tell you the grant period. This one says October start. So for this ETA, they expect you to be there in October. That answers some of the questions people were asking earlier about what does the tenure actually look like. We'll look at we'll go to another page or two and you'll see that that grant period will be different. So they're not all going to be the same. Scrolling down, they give you a basic sort of award profile, what this ETA is. For ETAs, they'll typically there explain whether like what type of age groups you might be working with in that country. Some countries have placements at all different age levels from elementary school through vocational training or post-secondary education. Others are going to say, that they really only have openings for elementary school and high school this year. So again, if you're trying to decide where you can go, you might be thinking about if you're thinking of an ETA, you might base some of your decisions on the population you want to work with, and then see if that country even offers it in its profile for that year. Grant period will, give you a little information about that. If they have an in-country orientation, this orientation will explain it. Some will do, I think I've seen that some are doing like webinars and Zoom orientations before you get to the country. Makes things a little bit more flexible for people arriving at different times. Candidate profile, some of them are going to be pretty detailed. So This one's fairly brief, but others get into a lot of detail about, this year we're really looking for people who have expertise in these areas or people who have interest in these specific initiatives. So again, the way that Fulbright is binational means that everything to do with the host country, what it's looking for is decided by the host country that year. And those needs can change year to year. Planning to apply to Taiwan, if the situation escalates and I'm not able to attend, what will happen to my application? Kind of unknown, but typically they will. So like a lot of people weren't able to go on their awards during the pandemic, right? But they had gotten it before the pandemic started. Some of them were able to like defer or delay it and were able to eventually go on that same one they got. Others, I don't know if this is true for Fulbright, but I know it's true for the related award, the Boren Award. They shifted some people who were supposed to go to Russia. They no longer wanted to have people going to Russia. So they found other placements for people who had won the award for Russia in other Russian-speaking countries so that those students could go do the same sort of work they wanted to do, but not in the country that they didn't want to send them to anymore. So there might be a workaround. That's always sort of with an international award, allowing you to go to places that may have geopolitical issues. There's always going to be the open question of if those issues escalate, what happens. Certainly, if there is like a level 4 travel advisory to a country, they will not let you go there on a Fulbright. But typically, I think these things are more handled on like a case-by-case basis. Okay, eligibility can be important. You need to, if there's any chance that you would be spending time in that country for any reason, like if you're doing a study abroad in the next year and you want to continue your Fulbright in the same place, a lot of countries won't let you. They will have, some of them have fairly strict residency requirements saying you cannot have spent like 3 months in this country in the year prior to your Fulbright. Others will be more lenient. This one allows 6 months. Some don't really care. But really, they really don't want you doing is it looking like you're simply using Fulbright to extend your stay in the country. Foreign language proficiency is one you'll definitely want to pay attention to. So Romania makes it very clear. They do not require you to have Romanian. It's encouraged, but it's not required. So you won't be dinged in your application if you don't have Romanian language skills. For the ETA, you'll also want to pay attention to the placement type. Again, this will break it down to you what sort of placements, what sort of populations you would be working with as an ETA. And tell you sort of where. So if you really don't want to go to a rural area and you see that placement locations include rural places, that might be an indication that's not the country you want to go to. For the ETAs, you also want to pay attention to the supplemental project. So some ETAs, again, things are so country specific. Some places will have you be doing basically like 40 hours of in-classroom work a week, and they won't expect you to be doing too much outside of that. They'll want you to have ways that you're trying to engage the host community, but they won't be requiring that of you. Other places will only require you to be in the classroom actually teaching for 15 to 20 hours a week, and they'll be expecting you to be spending about 20 other hours a week doing some sort of supplemental project. You design the supplemental project yourself, but it can carry a fair amount of weight depending on what it says in this section for that country profile. So if this one says you are encouraged to engage in other activities, others will say you are required to be doing something. Housing arrangements, of course, is important to pay attention to. Some will not provide you any assistance. Others will provide assistance. Others will provide housing. This one actually breaks down its grant benefits. A lot of them don't. The sort of general rule of thumb for Fulbright is you're not going to live lavishly, but you're going to survive. Yes, ETAs will sometimes need a secondary project. So you'll have to look at this section on the country profile. It will make it very clear to you whether they expect that from you or not. If they expect it from you, that portion of your application is going to carry more weight than if it's encouraged or optional. or in some places, not really even expected of you. So that'll just depend based on your country. You just need to look at it when you're in the country profile. And again, if you're trying to decide where to go, and you really don't want to be working 40 hours a week, you really want more time to be engaging in other projects and your other interests in the host country, you might want to be looking at places that require a supplemental project. Down here, they will always have some contact information. So these are some of the same people that I would contact if you reached out with me for a question. They tend to get back to people pretty quickly. Their communication is really good. So as you have questions, this is where you find the country specific people you can reach out to. All right, let's pull up another. Who wants to suggest a country we look at?
Czech Republic.
All right, so let's look at the Open Study Research Awards for this one. All right, so you see that they take degree levels at all degree levels. September start is listed. So they do specify it would be mid-September to mid-June. And they have a mandatory 4-day. They have a couple mandatory sort of things you will all of you will be brought together again for a 4-day orientation, a 1-day Thanksgiving meeting, and a 3-day mid-year conference. Yeah, so candidate profile here is pretty straightforward. Advanced students who are capable of working independently are preferred. You should have some experience in the proposed field of study. So pretty straightforward. Be able to do your work and know what you're doing. Others will have paragraphs for a candidate profile and get very specific about what they're looking for. Residency in host country is not permitted in year prior. They consider 3 months residency. Yes, Captain, that's exactly the sort of thing you could do on a supplemental project. So sometimes a supplemental project can be more sort of like community outreach or volunteer based. And again, they might specify this when you look at that in the country profile. Some will be more specific about what they want or what they expect in a supplemental project. Some will allow you to just be doing your own research while you're there. So the student I mentioned earlier who has the ETA to Uruguay, her research is also in just sort of generally literacy training, and Uruguay has a very high literacy rate. So part of what she'll be doing outside of the ETA work that she would be doing is to study some of the government initiatives that Uruguay has used to get its literacy rate where it is. So she gets to do research that's related to her field of studies, and I don't think it's her dissertation, but it's what she thinks would be project 2 after the dissertation. So she'll get to gather some, she'll get to make some contacts and sort of do preliminary work for a study that's completely separate from her ETA work. Are there anomalies regarding students enrolled in master's programs that are part-time? Not really. If you are, you don't even have to be enrolled as a student. You could, and especially at the graduate, for students who are in grad school, we can handle this in a lot of different ways. Some people just take a leave of absence to do their Fulbright. Others will enroll in something like thesis hours, or I believe the Career Center has a 0 credit experiential learning course that you can enroll into. So you could just be enrolled in that, and that way you maintain nominal enrollment at the university, which helps you keep your university health insurance and access to the library here and other sort of campus resources you might want to maintain access to. But as far as Fulbright is concerned, they don't care if you're a part-time student, a full-time student. If you are about to graduate with your master's and you won't even be enrolled at all, that's fine. They don't care. Okay, so this one, because it's an open study, they do detail what they're expecting in an affiliation, and they They might, others will be fairly specific about, yeah, so. Should typically be with a university. And then they say that others are also welcome. So you always want to pay attention to that as you're thinking through who your affiliations would be, see if they, in their affiliation section, do they detail exactly what it needs to be. They will provide advice on accommodation options. And again, you get the country specific contact info for at the bottom of the page. So also on the Fulbright website, under applicants, you can go to information sections. Fulbright does a lot of different webinars, and they'll probably have some coming up. You can go ahead and register for it. You see they are doing one in a couple days on introduction to graduate degree enrollment. So you could sign up for that and attend it if you wanted to. You can also go to past events though, and you will see a full list of recordings that happened last year, and you can just watch these on your own time whenever you want to. Again, they do a lot of different webinars, cover a lot of different things. Sometimes they'll have previous applicants there doing like a panel discussion. Sometimes it's things like navigating situations in a host country. Other times it's things related to preparing a strong application, thinking through supplemental projects, things like that. So these are a good resource. There is also the, they've added a thing. Let's see if we can find it. A word search. Yeah, so they have this whole thing you can use now to put in underneath the different criteria you're looking for. And it can help you narrow down. Again, if you're not really decided where you want to go, but you have a general idea that you want to do a Fulbright and you want it to be kind of like this or that. So if you know you're looking for an ETA and you know you want to be in, let's say, East Asia Pacific, but you don't have any language skills, and you're applying at the bachelor's level. Now it narrows us down to, these are the 4 you should be thinking about. So you can use this to help narrow down if you're not really decided on where you want to go. They just implemented this in the last year, I think. But it seems potentially useful to help you sort of think through the options given your language proficiency and where you want to go. Okay, so we're now coming up to 4 o'clock. Any final questions? Anything else anybody wants to know about the website or anything to do with how we do the application process here at FSU? Anybody on Zoom have any questions? Yeah, so the country here, so like Taiwan, I think has something like 150 ETA slots this year. I think I saw that Spain has like 180. So the number is how many of those opportunities exist in the country for this year. And you'll see that on the, when you go to the country profile too, you'll see that listed right up at the top. They'll say 18 English teaching, that they are going to offer up to 18 awards of that type this year.
Yeah, actually, I got a question, because before I looked at the website and like list like different regions in it, for example, I was looking at Spain.
Mhm.
Do you select beforehand what region you want to go to? Is it more like requests, or how does that work?
Yeah, so for Spain, it's Spain does it a little differently. They will want you to indicate in the application. I think you have to say, like your first line has to say your choice region and your choice placement type.
Okay.
And they specify that in the yeah, so they have a lot, and there's I think you can both, I think they allow you to both rank or say a few that you would be interested in, or to say specifically that like this is the one I am interested in. Yeah, let's clearly state their preference for placement type in the first sentence. So please specify if you would only accept placement in a specific region, or you can specify your order of preference. You can also indicate to them your preference for age group. So Spain wants you to be very clear and say, I want to do an ETA to the Galician region, and I want to work with elementary school students. I don't know if you're promised to get that. I don't know if they don't have a placement for you there, will they consider you for another region, or if that just drops you out of consideration. But they make it very clear they want you to say exactly where you want to go. Other countries will say, so for instance, like the Uruguay student I work with, Uruguay's profile said something like, students will work in, they will make you work sometime both in the capital city and in a small city, and you'll work with like different placement types. So you don't really get a say over it. They're gonna put you where they need you.
Okay.
And that's how some countries are gonna work. Others are going to be more like Spain and want you to specify what it is you're looking for. Okay, well, thank you all for joining us today. I'm happy to answer any final questions if there are any. This is being recorded. We will send the recording out along with these slides at some point soon. And again, if you didn't hear me say this earlier, now that all of you are, you've either registered or attended this, you are on our list of people who get our Fulbright communications. So when that Survey Monkey for the intent to participate and the pre-application is ready, you should get that link emailed to you. But if you don't for any reason, just please follow up with any of us. We'll make sure you get everything you need. There is no specific undergraduate ETA advisor. You'll probably wind up working with Jesse or Bonnie. But they both work with people applying to ETAs. Catherine, I see your other question. The more competitive ones have higher or lower numbers. Not necessarily. So Spain has a lot of open slots, but Spain also gets a lot of applications. Whereas somewhere like Bulgaria might only have 2 ETA positions, but it might only get 5 applications in the whole year. There is a way that you can see statistics. We certainly would recommend that you not base your country choice on the statistics, but you instead choose your country based on where you can make the best fit argument for why you should go there. Any other questions? Or I'm gonna shut things down if not. All right, well, thank you all for joining. See you next time.